hasn't already been said, my name is Adrienne Bradley, and I am a BCBA in Detroit, Michigan. And I have some images of some of the things that I'm involved in. I am a professor at Wayne State University in their undergraduate and graduate ABA programs. So I've been teaching in those programs for a little bit over a year now. I am the clinical director that was said earlier for Behavior Frontiers in our Michigan location. Behavior Frontiers provides ABA services all across the United States. So you can look into them if you're looking for a job or a provider, but I'm located in our Detroit, Michigan location. And then lastly, I am the president of Black Applied Behavior Analysts. And so we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that to uplift anyone that may identify as Black or African American within the field of ABA. And this is also for parents as well. We provide some parent resources and different trainings and opportunities for our parents, as well as our practitioners. We also offer an ally and advocate membership. So for those who may not identify as Black or African American, you are still able to join. And I will make sure to put the website link in the chat later on if anyone wants to check out any of these things. So today we're going to be talking about toilet training, and I'm just going to do a general overview due to time and audience of how do I know if my child is ready for toilet training? What are some of the prerequisites and readiness skills that we want to see? We're going to go over some different toileting strategies and then some recommendations and considerations that we need to make when we are thinking about toileting. And I'm gonna give you some of my experience as to how I came up with these things. And I also have references for everyone to look at the end as well. And then we'll open it up to questions. So number one, our main goal with toileting is that we don't want to buy any more pull-ups. We don't want to buy any more diapers. We want to increase our child's independency and have them get access to other learning opportunities that toileting may affect in relations to some education and opportunities. So that's why we're talking today, right? We're talking to some parents also because maybe you've tried toilet training in the past and it hasn't worked. Or maybe you're like, hey, I think I want to try it. What are some considerations that we'll make? Or maybe you're a behavior technician and you're going through your own toileting procedures and you just want to get some quick tips. So all of that will be addressed in today's webinar. So to start off, typically developing children begin to show signs of readiness for toileting or potty training between 22 and 30 months. So when we're typically looking at our kids or teenagers or adults with autism, that comes sometime a little bit later. So we're really looking at, on average, in my experience, I've started toilet training at about 3 or 4 years old, but I've definitely run into those clients that maybe 8, 9, or 10 or 15, and they weren't able to get access to services and they weren't able to get properly toilet trained. So we'll definitely go through what some of those barriers are. Some of the readiness skills that we want to make sure that if we are going to start toilet training, what are some skills that we are going to be looking for that they have? Number one is that receptive language, being able to follow one-step instructions, being able to understand the vocabulary that is related to toileting. So pull up or flush or let's go to the bathroom. Do they understand those things, right? And again, the things that we're saying as far as the readiness skills, if your child or your client doesn't have all of these, that's okay. So I've definitely toilet trained kids that have little to no receptive language, currently doing it right now with a couple clients. So that's not always a must-have prerequisite skill. You also know if they're interested, if they have interest in the toilet, or if they're messing with their diaper, right? And every time they're wet, they're kind of taking off their diaper and requesting for a new one. That's a really good indication that they may be ready for toilet training. They may have urinated in the toilet at some point. Sometimes you run into clients where they will not void in the toilet at all. They won't even sit on the toilet, right? So if your child or your client has expressed or shown interest in urinating or having voids or bowel movements in the toilet, that's another indication that they're ready for potty training. As I said earlier, following simple instructions, but the key here, without engaging in problem behavior. And we're going to dive a little bit more into how problem behavior can be a barrier to toilet training a little bit later, but we want to make sure that they're able to follow simple one-step instructions without engaging in a tantrum or any type of maladaptive or problem behavior. They are able to demonstrate some level of bladder or bowel movement control. So are they holding, right? Or are they just kind of going and tinkling, every once in a while in their diaper? And lastly, we have to make sure that the entire team is on board and committed to the toileting process. And I'm going to go over what it may look like if the entire team is not on board and not committed to the process. But definitely one of the only mandatory things that I think are key for readiness is that the team and the parents have to be on the same page and have to be on board with the toilet training process. And we'll talk about why that's a little more important a little bit later. Looking at some of the skills that are needed also for toileting, do they have imitation skills? Do they have good attending skills? Are they able to transition from one preferred location to another preferred location without engaging in problem behavior? And do they have minimal problem behavior? So let's touch on the imitation skill first. If your child does not have imitation or doesn't have imitation right away, that's okay. However, toileting will go a lot easier and a lot faster if they have imitation. If imitation is a skill in their repertoire. So being able to pull up their pants or their shorts or their pull-up diaper or their underwear. Also modeling for children, like, this is how we go to the restroom. This is what we do. If the boys watch dad and the girls watch mom, that's a really good way to model toilet training, but they have to have imitation skills in order for modeling to be truly effective, right? If they don't have imitation skills or attending skills, then modeling for them, whether you're doing it with toilet training or not, is not going to be as effective as we think it is, right? We can definitely expose them, but if they're not really registering that information, then we need to come up with another way that they're going to learn that information. Then going into the problem behaviors and why problem behaviors are very important to not have when you're doing toileting. Particularly when we're looking at functions of behavior, right? We have our 4 functions of access, attention, we have our sensory function, and we have an escape function. Without going into the functions, I just want us to focus on 2, the escape and the access function. If your client or your child engages in problem behavior due to one of these 2 functions, then toilet training may be a little bit more difficult. And I say that because when we're toilet training, and depending on what strategy we're using, we're taking them, we might be engaged in a preferred activity. They might be playing with the iPad or watching the TV or outside on the playground, but now it's time to go to the bathroom. So we have to take them from that preferred location to a non-preferred location, i.e. the bathroom, right? And we're doing this because they have to learn. However, they might engage in problem behavior on the way. And we don't want to pair the restroom with problem behavior. We want to pair the restroom with happiness and, oh, we're going to relieve your bladder and this is going to be so great, So when a child is engaging in problem behavior due to one of those two things, it makes toileting a little bit more difficult just because of the way toileting is and how we have to teach someone to be potty trained. So you always want to make sure to address the problem behaviors before you address the toileting. And I know a lot of our parents probably really don't like to hear that because, you know, they're probably like, oh, I can deal with the problem behaviors. I just want to stop buying diapers because they're expensive. And then you add in those pull-ups and I really want my child to be toilet trained, which is very valid. So working with your BCBA or working with your team to see how can you come up with a compromise of addressing both. And depending on the severity of the problem behavior and the intensity and the function, they may come back to you and say that we have to address the problem behavior before we adjust the potty training. But again, taking that team collaborative approach to the toilet training if your child does engage in some type of problem behavior. Do we have any questions on readiness? I know we said to save the questions to the end, but I think we're making good timing. So any questions on readiness on either one of these slides?
You can type your question in the chat, into the chat box. No questions so far.
No questions? Okay, great. So let's next look at some of the toilet training strategies, right? And I'm going to go over 3 toilet training strategies. We, number one, are going to have scheduled training. We have intensive training, and then we're going to talk about a combination of both. So first, we have our scheduled toilet training. So what is scheduled toilet training? We schedule different sit times on and off of the toilet. So for example, we may be teaching them to go every hour to start off. So for every hour, we are off the toilet, and then we may have a sit time of 3 to 5 minutes where we're sitting on the toilet and seeing if they will void that way. This is one of the preferred strategies that you see a lot going on. It requires minimal problem behavior because we're not spending all day in the bathroom or we're not going as frequently. You're able to transition a lot more easier if you transition to the bathroom every hour or every hour and a half versus every 5 minutes, right? And this is also a good strategy if they're already showing the prerequisite skills for toileting. This is a really good strategy to teach for toileting if they're showing some prerequisite skills. However, food for thought in using this scheduled training, it does not teach initiation. So how we get that feeling in our tummies and we're like, oh, we got to go to the bathroom, right? And that's how we go, and that's how we either request if we're in the classroom or we spend time somewhere else if we can go to the restroom. If we're teaching someone to go on a schedule, then it kind of is very difficult to teach that initiation because we're teaching them to just go every 2 hours, not to go off of that natural feeling that we have when we've drank too much water, we ate something that causes us to have a bowel movement. So it's just a consideration to make when you're doing scheduled toilet training. So just to re-emphasize how scheduled toilet training works, you start at a baseline and you take them every 30 minutes or every hour, depending on where your baseline is at. And how do we choose which interval is appropriate for my kid, right? So if we know, I probably am changing Johnny every hour because he's wet his diaper. So we want to start that toilet training schedule to take him maybe every 45 minutes because we want to see if we can beat the time that they're going in their diaper or their pull-up, right? If we don't have underwear on. And we're going to talk about a few things and how we can catch accidents and different strategies and resources that we use for that. But that is scheduled toilet training.
We have a question from Rachel.
Okay.
Rachel, I'm going to open your mic. You can talk.
Oh, hi. Thank you. So ours is almost 7, and this is exactly what his special ed teacher and I were just starting to talk about. That we can put him on a schedule, but we really think he struggles with the actual feeling, like he cannot feel when he has to go because of whatever sensory issues he has. And that's been a frustration for him. And so I'm not quite sure what to do with that, because we can sit him on the toilet, in a schedule, but there's no way to tell if he's got to go. It's just sort of by chance.
Right, right. So the next strategy we're going to go over might be a better strategy to use, but also re-ask that question when we go over our considerations, because there may be something that maybe within this scheduled training you guys can tweak, and it may work without having to go to a different strategy to help with that feeling. So hold that question when we go over to the next strategy, and or when we go over the considerations that will probably be answered. If not, then let's hear specifically what your needs are and see if I can make some basic considerations. Because that happens quite a bit. Any other questions?
No question.
Okay, awesome. Okay. So the next strategy that we use is the intensive toilet training strategy. And Rachel, this is where you might be able to chime in. So one of the things with the intensive toilet training is we are increasing our fluid intake and having a close proximity to the toilet. So this is where a lot of kids spend all day in the restroom, and we're pumping fluids and we're hoping to catch that void or that accident. One of the things that the intensive toilet training is really good at is it's breaking that control that the diaper or the PullUp has, right? So for example, if our child is 8 years old and they are not toilet trained yet, then that diaper has all of the bladder control. So with the intensive toilet training, you take the diaper off, you're already in the restroom, you have tile on the restroom floor, hopefully. So any accidents or anything like that is very easily cleaned up, but you're very close to the toilet, so you're able to kind of guide, like, oh, we're having a void, let's move over to the toilet. And so you set up a predetermined number of voids that you want for them to have successful voids in the toilet, then slowly increase away from the toilet, away from the bathroom. And it really pairs that initiation piece, that feeling that they're getting, because you're catching it right when it's actually happening. And they're like, oh, this feeling is getting paired with this action, and this is what I need to do, because you're going to increase your fluid intake. You're already going to be in the restroom, things like that. This strategy is suggested for those who need a lot of multiple opportunities to learn something that doesn't necessarily need a little bit more intrusive learning opportunities. Also, able to tolerate being in one location. So at the start of this, you're pretty much going to be in the restroom the entire time, and that seems like a lot, right? However, this strategy works really, really fast, because you can toilet train it with this strategy within, a week or 2 weeks or so, if done correctly. And this strategy is also used a lot if your child or your client is low functioning and needs those multiple opportunities, needs that initiation feel to know when they have to go to the restroom and things like that. This one is, like I said, it's very intrusive and it's very intensive. So that's just a consideration to take into account if you were to use this intensive toileting strategy. A lot of my parents and BCBAs don't like to go to this one first. We like to do the scheduled training first because it's not as intrusive. You're able to kind of free flow. But also with this one, The only downturn with this one is that a lot of your time is spent in the restroom in the beginning, you know, maybe the first 2 or 3 days or so, and then you're kind of moving out and getting more into a natural flow for toileting. Then lastly, we can have a combination of both. So a combination between the scheduled training and the intensive toilet training. You take the two strategies, and let's say these two strategies have been deemed unsuccessful. We need to do a combination of both. So maybe phase one, we're just really teaching that initiation piece. And so we're gonna do intensive toilet training for the initiations. And then once that is down packed, you can then go to a scheduled training framework. Or you can do a scheduled training and incorporate a increase in fluid intake, along with making sure you're really close to the restroom, but you're not in the restroom, in order to get that intrusiveness and that intensity that is needed for the client. Okay. Any questions on these three strategies? I think I just saw something pop up in the chat, so I'm not sure.
Someone is talking about initiating on going to the bathroom. He said he's potty trained to the point that he goes when he's taken. However, there are times he said I can tell he has to go and I direct him to the potty. So it's about initiating. Okay. What do you do for that?
Yeah, so you always want to focus on initiations either right when they're going or right when you can tell that they have to go, right? So if they are, let's say they're non-vocal and they either use PECs or some type of iPad device or something like that. A really good strategy also to use is a bathroom card. So let's say you're doing scheduled training and you're taking them every 2 hours. So at that 2-hour mark, before you get to the restroom, you want to have them, prompt them to request to go to the restroom. So then you're pairing that action with that feeling, right? Another thing you can do, let's say you're doing the intensive toilet training. When you start seeing those precursors, those behaviors that they engage in to let people know that they have to go, prompt them to request either with the bathroom card, vocally, or with their communication device, the alternative communication device. And doing that every time in the beginning will start to pair the initiation with that feeling, or with, okay, we're going to the bathroom, this is what I need to do. So that's just two different ways that we can pair that initiation piece. But we can go over more initiation or more toilet training specific questions once we get through, and we can maybe go over some considerations that might help with that initiation piece as well.
So we have another question here about the night toilet training.
Nighttime toilet training?
Yes.
Okay. We can probably save that one for the Q&A.
Okay. Okay,
great. So what are some considerations? Now that we've talked about some different strategies and things like that, what are some considerations and some variables that ultimately make those strategies work, right? And one of the ones that I wanted to discuss is what reinforcer or preferred item we're using to teach those voids. So one of the areas that we know for children who have autism, we have to use an extra tangible item, social interaction, anything like that for them to get, I just did a good thing and I got this, right? It's the whole concept of just reinforcing the desired behavior. Now, when we are doing toilet training, one of the key things that make toilet training work is the preferred item or the reinforcer that you are using. We only want to use a reinforcer or a preferred item for toileting. So let's say, and we also want to make sure that it's a highly motivating reinforcer or preferred item. So let's say Kevin, right? Kevin is really only motivated for the iPad or some type of electronic. Either that or he really likes watermelon. So I'm not suggesting to use food. Well, I'll give you some examples of using some social interactions. I'm just going to use this as an example for you guys. So let's say I can get Kevin to do anything for watermelon, and we're teaching toileting. And so we want to use the watermelon for the voids in the toilet or bowel movements, whatever you're going to be toilet training on. We only want to use watermelon for the voids. We can't use watermelon with anything else that happens throughout the day or any other desired behavior. So you want to make sure you have a toilet training, potty training specific reinforcer, and that the entire family or whoever is with this child on the day-to-day will be able to stick with using that reinforcer. One of the pitfalls for this is a lot of times our children with autism have very restrictive preferred items and very restrictive reinforcers. So what do you do when that happens? But you want to teach toilet training, right? Is there a different variation of that reinforcer that we can use? So for example, TV and electronics, a lot of families are really against using electronics, but we also have to take into account what motivates your child. And we need to use that for potty training. So maybe you play 1 minute of the Wiggles, right? My kids love the Wiggles. You play 1 minute of a specific Wiggles video, and he or she gets to watch that whenever they have a void in the toilet. If they don't void in the toilet, then they don't get to watch that video. Let's say you have a child that really loves tickles, right? And let's get into some social interactions. Then we're going to use tickles. They are highly motivated for tickles. They will do anything for tickles. So we're going to use tickles for toilet training. Whenever they have a successful void in the toilet, that's when you give tickles. If they do not have a successful void in the toilet, they do not get tickles. If they engage in, let's say, some programming, you use something else. So you only want to have a toilet-specific reinforcer that is going to be easy and acceptable for everyone to use. You also want to make sure that your technicians or you as a parent are in constant communication with the BCBA. So I have a couple kids right now that are toilet training, and I have some practicum students that are getting that potty training experience. I probably discuss different variables that are changed almost on a daily basis, even if I'm not supervising with them. Because one variable can change something, and if I don't have all the information in that moment, then we might have missed that opportunity. So a lot of BCBAs don't like toilet training because it's very time consuming on our part. However, it's very key for our parents and our families and our clients. So it's something that we have to engage in. So you want to make sure that communication is dealt with on a daily basis when you're potty training. Another consideration to make is that the family has to be committed. I've had a client where the family doesn't do the potty training protocol over the weekend. So every Monday we're starting over, and he's doing schedule training. So because they didn't take him over the weekend, he's now having accidents. And so every Monday I have to restart, because in order for us to move forward, we make every decision off of data. So in order for us to move forward in toilet training, I have to know how many accidents did he have? Did that time frame work if we're doing scheduled training, right, over the weekend? What did that look like? How much fluid did he have? And we use all of that information to help guide us in our decision making when it comes to toilet training, and if we're moving up, if we're moving back, if we need to switch strategies. So family time family time commitment has to be key with toilet training, because the ABA provider cannot do it all, because after they leave us, they still have to learn how to potty train. And we're only with them 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day, 2 hours a day, depending on your schedule. And now he's with the parents 12 hours a day. So imagine all of that missed learning opportunity if the family is not committed for when the ABA provider leaves their home, or if you guys go to a center base, goes back home. And within that turns into the data collection piece. Data collection is a key point that is going to make your toilet training experience positive. If you're not taking data on accidents or fluid intake, then ultimately the BCBA is going to have a little bit of difficulty making some considerations and changing different variables to make sure that the potty training program is going as efficiently as possible. So data collection is going to be key, and that families and technicians are taking that data. I also want to encourage families to vocalize what their concerns are. So if you are concerned with using food as a reinforcer, please don't hesitate to let the BCBA or the BCABA or whoever is running your case know that, because then we'll adjust that, right? Although your child may have restrictive reinforcers, it's still my job as the BCBA to increase the amount of reinforcers that they have available to them and the variety of reinforcers that they have available to them. And there also might be an aspect that you may not be thinking of as a parent that me as the practitioner and the provider will think of that gets us away from using food. So, or let's say you're really uncomfortable with using the intensive toilet training strategy. That's okay. It's okay to try something else first. And so you always just want to be comfortable that you're able to voice your concerns with the BCBA or whoever is in charge of your case with toilet training. Okay. So before we get to our question and answer, and I know we're making some really good timing, these are just some recommendations based off of the literature and based off of my experience that I will make when you guys are doing toilet training. So one of the things I want to talk about is, how do we know when our child has an accident if they're still in diapers? So sometimes the research shows that if you are toilet training and still wearing a diaper, that increases the rates of accidents and then decreases the rate of successful voids in the toilet. It's also really hard for us to know when they're having an accident and when they're not. And so you're kind of just going off of this whim, like, okay, we're going every hour, but let's say he's having an accident every 30 minutes. So if we're in that diaper and we're not using a potty alarm or we're not wearing underwear, then how are we supposed to know when exactly did that accident happen? So we always really encourage for our clients and our staff, encourage to wear underwear off from the beginning. So if you have to desensitize your child to wearing underwear, then we want to do that in the beginning before we start toilet training, because ultimately when we toilet train, they're gonna have to wear underwear eventually, right? We don't want to toilet train and then still allow our kids to wear diapers. It's also will help with knowing when they're having accidents or not, or if them being wet is going to be a good way to decrease accidents. That's also going to be addressed if we wear underwear from the beginning. Another aspect to look at, let's say your child's not going to wear underwear, right? Let's say we don't want to do all that laundry because that's a lot of laundry in the beginning. We have what we call a potty alarm. And so a potty alarm is something that gets hooked up to the diaper on the inside. And then whenever any type of fluid touches the sensor, then it goes off. And some of them might have a really loud noise. Some of them just vibrate. Some of them just have a regular monotone neutral noise. It's really a good indicator for the people around us to know when someone is voiding and having an accident or not. Because it gives out an external sound, right? A lot of times, what's the barrier with that potty alarm is your child gonna wear it? right? It hooks up just on the side of their pants, and then the sensor will go into the diaper. And so with that, you may have to do some desensitization or some shaping to help them to get to wear the potty alarm. But sometimes we think they're not going to wear it, and they actually will wear it. So it's never, I always say, let's try it. Let's see how it goes. And then we'll go from there. So for those families that are like, oh yeah, my kid's not going to wear underwear, or I'm not willing to do that much laundry in the beginning, and I really want to get them holding, a potty alarm is a really good alternative. Another recommendation that I have is to add in dry pants checks for reinforcement. So one of the things we know is that our kids learn based off of reinforcement and prompting. So if we are reinforcing them staying dry, then that's going to increase the duration that they're holding for. It also gets them to know, like, yes, you're staying dry, you're holding, you're not having an accident, you're doing a great job, right? So we always want to make sure that we're providing that positive reinforcement when they're, even if we think it's minimal. We never know with our kids, right? Our kids are kids on the spectrum. They might be different, but we also want to provide them that positive reinforcement if we can, and providing that opportunity with dry pants checks is a really good, easy, quick way to do that. Back to that initiation piece that I was talking about earlier. So when we're doing reinforcers and utilizing preferred items for voids, we also want to use reinforcers for initiations and to pair that. So if your child initiated but didn't go to the restroom, I still want to reinforce that initiation, right? And we want to utilize what we call differential reinforcement. And differential reinforcement is exactly how it sounds. If we have one desired behavior, then we want to reinforce that desired behavior more. If they were able to do it independently, without being prompted, without needing my assistance, we want to give them all the reinforcer. So let's say we had to prompt the initiation. We still want to provide some type of reinforcement, but not to the magnitude or the level that is needed if they were to have done that independently, because we needed to prompt that. But we still want to provide reinforcement so we can slowly increase them being able to make that connection between how they are feeling within their bladder and then initiating that, that response. Another recommendation that I will make is to increase your fluid intake when you are toilet training. The more intake of fluids you have, the more opportunities you're going to have to void in the toilet, which is more learning opportunities to do the right thing. You don't want to do an abnormal amount of fluid. However, you do want to make sure that they are having some constant fluid intake to make sure that we can get that constant bladder feeling that we need to do in relations to toilet training and getting that feeling. So those are just some considerations and recommendations. And here are my references. So that will get sent out. And they're just some different articles and different studies that have gone over toileting and how I've gathered some of the information in this website. So I now want to open it up to Q&A specific questions and answer those.
Yes, we can go over a couple of questions. Just to go back to underwear, Rachel said that her child is scared of wearing underwear because he's feeling the urine and he doesn't like that. So what do you suggest for that?
So for kids that are scared to wear the underwear, because I imagine it's because he doesn't want to get wet, right? So in one breath, we kind of want to use that because if we put underwear on him, that's just going to increase the amount of times that he's not going to have an accident. However, we want to do that in a way that's not traumatizing, right? And anxiety inducing. So one of the ways is you compare the diaper and the underwear together. So we put the underwear on first and then put the diaper on second, so that it won't like see, the fluid wouldn't seep down his leg and he wouldn't get wet. So that's a way, but then slowly working with your BCBA and working with the team to slowly decrease that, that diaper, because eventually he will need to be able to wear underwear. But talking with him about, if we go in the toilet and you go when you have to go, then it won't happen as far as the feces or the urine being on their legs or anything like that. But working with the team on desensitization, another thing that we can do is, let's say it wasn't about the urine or something getting on their legs and they just really didn't like the feel of it, right? We know texture can sometimes affect our kids on the spectrum. So just exposure to underwear, just like we do food exposure or exposure to just non-aversive things. The more you're exposing them to underwear, the less likely they're gonna have this anxiety-inducing or very aversive negative reaction to the underwear. So those are just some 2 suggestions that I would make in relations to underwear.
Okay. And talking about underwear again. Sarah is asking if she puts underwear under the PullUp, if that will be better, because she doesn't mind the laundry, but she doesn't want her carpet to be dirty.
Yeah, carpet is a thing, and carpet cleaners and all of that. Listen, potty training is messy. There's no way for us to avoid accidents or anything like that. So as a family, when you guys are deciding to do potty training, then that's also the cleanup, the laundry, the carpet cleaner, the time commitment, things like that. So really discussing that before starting. If you put the diaper on first and then the underwear, then the diaper is gonna absorb the fluids. However, one of the considerations that you need to make with that is, is he gonna wear a potty alarm to know when he's having an accident? Because we don't wanna do delayed reinforcement. And we don't wanna do delayed error correction either, because then it's not gonna stick. So coming up with a compromise that addresses the cleaning aspects from the family, but also knowing when the child is having an accident is where that potty alarm comes into play, because then you don't have to wear underwear with the potty alarm. You can do the potty alarm with a diaper or a PullUp. And then you still get that accident aspect of that. So then once they get up to being able to hold for 2 hours or has that self-initiation, you add the underwear, but they're already potty trained and you bypass all that cleaning. So I would look into using the potty alarm for that as well.
Okay. And I think Sherry raised her hands. Sherry, you can talk now.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
So I had a question about doing the potty training, because I was potty training my client, and he's doing really well. As a matter of fact, to me, he's actually potty trained. But the thing is that sometimes when he is caught in playing something that he's like interested in, you can tell he has to go to the bathroom. I'm showing him his communication PEX board to say, like, this is the potty. Do you need to go to the potty? Kind of show him, like, you can go. It's no problem. And he doesn't want to go. So I'm okay. So I let him play again. And you can tell he needs to go. And I keep showing him. And then he doesn't make the choice of going. But then I take him. And as soon as I put him on the potty, he pees. And in my mind, I'm like, little one, you could have gone. It's okay to go. You can stop playing for a second, pee, and come back to it. Like, I think sometimes my assumption is that he's going to miss out on something.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't want to stop to go to the bathroom.
Right.
So how do I And now we're going back to the center now too, starting Monday, which is going to be interesting because the bathroom's going to be further away and all this kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
how can I teach him? It's okay to go to the bathroom when you're playing.
Yeah. So I think part of it is teaching him that activity is still going to be there. You know, we're going to step away for a second, and it might not even be surrounded around toilet training. You know, maybe working on being able to tolerate an activity to discontinue, to go do something real quick and then come back. So showing him that the activity is still going to be there. All of our coloring papers or whatever it is that you're doing are still going to be here. And we're going to go really quick, and then we're going to come back. If it's something that you can carry with you, let's say he's playing with like mini cars or trucks or something, and you're going to say, hey, listen, this is still going to be here. We're going to bring it with us. We're going to, you know, pretend this is a car. We're going to bring this with us, and then we're going to set it outside, right outside of the bathroom. You're going to void, and then we're going to come right back, and we're going to be playing with it. The other thing you can look at is talking with your BCBA to put in a reactive strategies for accidents. So if he's toilet trained, right, and you know, up to your knowledge, and you guys aren't having any accidents or anything like that, and you don't prompt him to go, then what is that error correction or that reactive strategy that you guys are utilizing to show that, nope, we don't have accidents, we void in the toilet, we keep our pants dry, and then that'll also help with him being like, when he feels that feeling to go, regardless of what he's doing, he's gonna go. But that also happens with us. I could be, you know, I love TGIT and Grey's Anatomy and Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder, right? That's a 3 hours long that I want to be in front of the TV to watch my shows, because those are my shows, and I don't want to, you know, miss anything because Shonda Rhimes likes to do things real fast, right? So even me as a neurotypical individual, I don't like sometimes leaving things that I'm enjoying doing to go to the restroom. So I will wait to the last itty bitty second, and I'm like, okay, I can't hold it anymore, I gotta go. Or if you're on a road trip, right, we do that. But also we know what the consequence is gonna be if we have an accident on ourselves if we do that. So what does that look like? With even our kids on the spectrum. So Sherry, does that help? Maybe some suggestions? Great, awesome.
Yes. So can we come back to the nighttime toilet training?
Yeah, nighttime toilet training.
Yeah.
I know I didn't touch on that, so I will do the best.
And someone else talked about bowel movement as well. So if you can address both at the same time.
Yeah, so what's the question for nighttime?
They just don't know how to handle it, how to manage nighttime. I think they have a lot of accidents. And for the bowel movement, it's just, you know, the child does it standing or in the diaper. So just how to teach him, number 2.
Yeah. So for the nighttime question, like how do we address that? For the person that asked that, can you tell me the age of your child? Because one of the things in the research, it shows that nighttime toilet training, even for neurotypical children, comes a lot later. So they're still seeing accidents of children that are like 7, 8 years old, 6, 7, 8 years old, that still have some nighttime accidents. Son is 4. Deep sleeper. The 7, deep sleeper. I see that, Carla. So the potty alarm will actually help to address that. And then also, how does, if your child knows that feeling, if they weren't trained on a schedule and was trained to recognize that feeling, then letting them know it's okay to get up at night to go to the restroom, but then you got to go back to sleep. So then you run into, okay, if they get up to go to the restroom, when are they going back to sleep? Can I trust them to be up by themselves on their own in the home without getting into the refrigerator or just anything and everything. So those are just some food for thoughts to think about, is the sleep aspect and how comfortable you are with them getting up in the night. To start though, I would start with the potty alarm to know, okay, around 4 a.m. is when they're having these accidents, or 2 a.m. or something like that. Hopefully not, right? And teaching that. And then as well as putting down some, and this is for our cleaning and for our laundry folks out there, putting down some pee pads. The doggy pee pads work really, really well for nighttime as you guys are working through teaching the nighttime toilet training. So hopefully if those, Carla and Catherine, let me know if those suggestions help. If not, then we'll do some more discussion if you haven't tried those things already. Then bowel movement. So I had a client that he was specifically in ABA for this specific reason. He would stand up, he would ask mom for a diaper to let her know that he needed to go. Mom would give the diaper. He would then go on his iPad, lean over the table, have a bowel movement, then let mom know, I'm all done. Mom would go up, clean him, change him, and he would go about his day, okay? It took us about 4 months to toilet train to get him to actually go in the toilet. So let me tell you what I did. But again, I don't know your children specifically. I don't know, so these are just general recommendations for you guys to go back to your ABA providers to talk a little bit more specifically in that. But we could do a whole webinar on bowel movement toilet training. So keep that in mind for your future webinars. So what I did was he particularly was scared to have a bowel movement in the toilet. It was something about the feeling, he was just really scared. And so you can do one of two things. Some people have cut holes in the diaper. So then when they do go and they're sitting on the toilet, the poop will just kind of, naturally fall through the diaper, and then, slowly but surely they get desensitized, right? Let's say that you can't even get them to sit on the toilet, right? We have to just start there. So I did reinforcing sitting on the toilet. If he sat on the toilet for a second, right? Just go sit. If you sit, here's this popsicle, right? Here we get to play airplanes with dads, or we get to go fly the kite outside. Reinforcement and knowing your child's reinforcement level, schedule is also going to be key in toileting in general, whether it's bowel movements or not. So first, starting to reinforce sitting on the toilet. Then see if you can cut the hole and see if you can get that way. Let's say you can't get that way, right? One of the things to look at is if you know your child, whenever they eat, something, it induces a bowel movement. So for me, and this is getting real personal, whenever I drink coffee, within the hour, I have to go have a bowel movement. So when you're doing toileting training on bowel movements, keeping track of, is there a specific time that you always know, yep, 6 o'clock, 30 minutes after dinner, we're having a bowel movement? Or specific food. For some people it's bananas. Anything with like a lot of heavy fiber really induces bowel movements. So looking at what's in their diet that has a lot of heavy fiber that may induce a bowel movement to occur. So then pairing that food, reinforcing scheduled sits, cutting holes in the diapers, or whatever the case may be. That's how we got to him having bowel movements in the toilet. And slowly also restricting where he could go if he had a bowel movement in the diaper. So let's say you can have a bowel movement in the diaper, but you have to be right outside of the bathroom to do so. Or let's say they always have a bowel movement at the corner in their room or something like that. How can you slowly move them towards them having a bowel movement in the bathroom while still having the diaper on. So you're not taking the diaper away, you're just moving the location in which that they're allowed to have a bathroom, a bowel movement into the bathroom. But you don't just want to do it, oh, today he was at the table, tomorrow we're forcing them to be in the bathroom. It's a shaping procedure, and you want to use reinforcement and proactive strategies so it's not super aversive, right? Because if you rip that Band-Aid off and you make them go in the bathroom right away, then you might see regressions, and then you're pairing that aversiveness with the toilet and the bathroom in relations to voids or bowel movements, and that's what we don't want to do, because then we'll get into a whole nother, situation. So let me know in the chat if those who have children with bowel movement issues, if some of those suggestions you found helpful, and maybe to go back to your ABA provider or whoever your team is, to see if you can do some of those suggestions.
I think we'll take one more question.
Okay.
Martine is asking, when do you know it's a medical problem and not a behavioral problem?
Good question. So whenever I do toilet training, I require my families to get a pediatrician note signing off that, they're okay and good to go. A lot of times it comes into medical issues with the bowel movements and with constipation and things like that. So you always want to make sure you get medical clearance before you start toilet training. Also, another thing to take into account is in your toilet training, if you are increasing fluids, particularly for girls, you don't want to induce like a UTI or some type of bladder infection because they're peeing so much, or they're holding because they're so scared to urinate or void or anything like that. So I always, off top, require all of my families to get a pediatrician note letting me know that we're cleared, we're good to go, there hasn't been any medical concerns, because me as a BCA, I can't address those medical concerns, Another way that, let's say we started off as it was behavioral and we are questioning now, have we made it medical, because they're so scared to void in the toilet. So then always consulting with a pediatrician or urologist to make sure that those concerns are getting met. A lot of times I have a client currently that I supervise, and we speak with the urologist every week because they don't have muscle bladder control. So their ability to hold and feel isn't there. And that's why they aren't toilet trained. So we're working with the urologist to increase that feeling. But then on the behavioral side, we're working on, okay, you need to go every hour, and regardless of how you feel or regardless of what's going on, you have to go every hour. So that's where ABA comes into play, with teaching him that although you have this medical thing going on, you recognize that you have to go every hour. So how can we encourage him to always do that? So I hope that helps.
Yes, it helps. I think we have covered all of our questions. Is there anything else that you want to cover?
No, I don't mind staying on a little bit. If people had any other questions or just wanted to chit chat with me, I can stay on for a few more minutes, but thank you so much for attending today. I will put my email in the chat as well for anyone to contact me. And yeah, thank you for attending.
Well, thank you everyone. And we appreciate you being here today. Thanks for joining us. All right.